So you've started your research on buying an investment property here in my market of Surrey or the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, and you don't exactly know where to start, and that's how you ended up on a YouTube video like this one. So today I thought I would share with you 7 mistakes that I see almost every brand new investor make, or at least they consider making, before they buy their first investment property. And these are usually in my market condos for an entry-level investor. And trust me, I get these same 7 comments or 7 things that I see happening from every single new investor, and you're probably no different. So hopefully this helps you out in your journey. I'm gonna be totally upfront and honest. I'm gonna disappoint a few people here with what you thought your dreams and journey was gonna be into becoming some sort of a real estate tycoon. But nevertheless, this is the facts. This is the truth. And I see it all the time. So I'm gonna try and speed up your process and your learning about what to look for and what to do or not to do to help make this as least painful of a process as possible. Because if you're an investor, particularly right now in Surrey, you're probably getting beat up pretty good. And indeed, if you are new to the real estate investing space, you're thinking about getting into it, or you're just interested in real estate in general, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow this community to reach more people. And the other thing you can do to help me reach more people is click the like button, because that will help YouTube push this out through the algorithm to, again, more people just like you. And in fact, if you are ready, you think this is the time that you're going to buy an investment property, or maybe you're looking to sell your principal residence, and you're doing that again within, I'm going to say it again, my market of Surrey or the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, please feel free to book a call with me right now using the link in the description below at a time that works best for you. And now let's hop in to the top 7 things that I see every junior real estate investor, let's call them. They either think these things or they say these things. They at least come up in the meetings when I'm meeting with a new client, or if I'm just having a casual conversation with people. These are the things that they think are going to get them into or be a part of becoming an investor. Starting off with number 1, trying to play the short-term rental game. Now, short-term rentals for a time was a thing. The BC government has basically taken them out. You're not buying a condo anymore and putting any sort of a short-term rental in it. It now must basically be done in your principal residence if you're going to do it at all. But the reason people want to look into short-term rentals is because you're probably going to get double the rent or double the gross rent at the end of the month that you are from a long-term rental. But the difference there is that a long-term rental is a little bit more passive. It's definitely not completely passive income. And short-term rental is more like a side hustle. It's more a gig. It's more like a second job more than anything. So the fact that it's now basically illegal everywhere, and it's not really an investor mindset, it's more of a work mindset, it's not really something that most people should be looking at doing. Now, personally, I think the short-term rental thing is kind of gone by the wayside. It kind of had a good run here for the last, say, 5 to 8 years, something like that. But at this point in time, no level of government wants it at all, even though there's plenty of demand for it. And yes, you can make good money at it. It's just likely not for you if you're new to the investing business, or if you are looking for passive income. Getting on to the second mistake that I hear every single brand new investor make, or at least they consider making. Hopefully a lot of you out there aren't actually ending up in this situation, but that is that most new investors to the market, they really want to look for that magical foreign student to become their tenant. Now, in a bunch of people's mind out there, there's these rich, magical foreign students that are coming from, say, China or India, and their rich families are paying for them to be here. So that tenant's going to pay too much. It's only one person, and they're going to live in the property, and they're just going to, I don't know, they're going to somehow attract this magical, wonderful tenant that's just going to be fantastic. Now, I don't want to comment badly about anybody that's a tenant in this type of situation, but I'm just going to lay it out on the line here for you. The fact is that most foreign student tenants, generally speaking these days, they're not that rich family member from somewhere else anymore anyway. And the other side of it is so many of these folks are scrounging to pay their rent and to find housing and accommodation these days that we're starting to see one student rent a property, and then next thing you know, 6, 7, 8 students are living in that unit. So get that thought of the foreign student renter out at, like, they don't even have a job, right? They're bringing money from overseas, maybe, hopefully. Maybe they're driving Uber on the side illegally. Who knows what the real situation is? But that money could dry up at any point in time. Instead, you should be looking for a much more established tenant in your property. And that's actually one of the reasons why my preferred place to look for properties is actually away from transit. I want somebody who's a little bit more established, who's got a vehicle and a driver's license and is established in the country, or at least established within their own finances and have a job and that sort of thing. So stop considering the foreign student. It is not going to likely be a very good experience for you. I know what I was like in that age group at that time, and I probably wouldn't have wanted me being that tenant. You may not either. Mistake number 3, and again, this is almost every, specifically, I guess, the younger investors, they want to put the property into the name of an LLC. Well, first off, in Canada, we don't have LLCs. If you want to come to me and say, I want to put it in a limited company, it's a different thing than you're watching like these American YouTube investing videos. An LLC they have way more liability down there. They're very suey down there. They really like to get litigation-y in the States. We don't really have that problem here. We also don't have LLCs. We do have corporations. That's all we have here. We have corporations. There's no levels of limited company versus other types of companies. It's a corporation that you can hold a property in. The problem with holding your property in a corporation is you lose all of the tax benefits of real estate that go into your personal name. For instance, capital gains start immediately on the first dollar at 66% inclusion rate, when if you have it in your personal name, you get the $250,000 exemption. It's also harder to finance a property within a company name because the company likely doesn't own any assets or have any income. So it's not just as simple as putting it in the company name. With the bank, they just don't really work that way. So it's a lot harder than you think. You're losing your tax advantages and you're not gaining necessarily the advantages that they have in the States of limiting your liability. And on top of that, here in most new companies in Canada are actually guaranteed by the owners of the company. So if you do default on, say, a loan, they're not just going to stop at the LLC or the corporation here in Canada. They're going to go after the guarantor of that loan, and that will be you, the owner. So put the property in your personal name unless you plan on buying 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 properties. Put the property in your personal name at least the first time, and then later on, if you do become the monopoly man and own a ton of real estate, that's where you would look at a company being a benefit to holding your real estate for other reasons other than tax purposes. Tax efficiency is not a good thing anymore in Canada within a corporation for owning real estate. And so learn more about that. But I'm telling you, most of the time you should not be putting at least your single first 1 or 2 condos into a company. Number 4 on my list is making the mistake of mixing up purchasing a pre-sale and speculation with actual investing. Lots of people think that they're going to become these big, again, tycoon kind of flippers, and they're going to make moves by buying some sort of a pre-sale property. Maybe they can flip the property before it completes. Maybe they can complete on it and flip it again. I got bad news for you. These taxes have come in to stop flipping. The developers are wise to it. They don't want to compete against you. So most of these contracts now cannot be flipped anyway. But more than anything, this is speculation. Anybody that's putting their name on a piece of paper for 3 years while putting down like 5 to 20% and hoping that that piece of paper is worth more in 3 years and then just flipping it, you're not a real estate investor. You are trying to time the market. And unfortunately, as we're finding out right now in the marketplace, there are people completing, and thankfully I don't have many of them because I don't like pre-sales in the first place, but we are seeing lots of people now completing on properties for $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. They're worth $100,000, $150,000 less than the number that they have on the paper. So not only are they not making money, they're losing money, and they may have to complete on the property and hold that property and continue to lose money on it monthly rather than walk away from their deposit or even come to the closing table now with extra cash just to get out from under that property. So don't confuse pre-sales. Don't confuse assignment of contract. Don't confuse any of that with real estate investing. It is not. Real estate investors buy properties where they're going to put in long-term tenants, and their goal is generally either 2 things. 1 is cash flow, or 2 is principal pay down. The 5th mistake is not one that every investor makes, but about half of you will, because half of you run out there and just simply buy a property and you don't know what you've done. So you're not making this mistake. That might be a mistake of its own, but I'm not going to name it here. The 5th mistake is actually the other 50% that overanalyze the deal. When you set out to buy an investment property, you should have your fundamentals there. You should know what your costs approximately are going to be. You should know what areas that you want to be looking at, what type of construction you're looking at, and what your goal is to dispose of the property in the future, or maybe hold on to for a very, very long time. But way too often, I see investors really worry about the nitty gritty of getting down into, say, their mortgage payments fluctuating $5 or $10 per month. And that is so much headspace that could just be used elsewhere. Just, you shouldn't really be focusing on that little bit. If you're making a deal for $5 a month, you should not be an investor. Rather, you need to focus on where you think the value of that property, using all of the information you have now, is going to be in the future, how much cash flow you have. But honestly, if you're looking for this microscopic little difference between, is King George Station going to inflate more, say, for instance, than Surrey Central? It's so microscopically different that it's really not worth bothering with. Pick the area that you know and feel is a good investment for you, and go ahead with a deal that makes sense. But don't waste too much time nitpicking over little differences. Because if you get destroyed in the investing market, it's going to be because of a big change in the marketplace or something massive like a strata insurance problem. Not whether or not the maintenance fee over here is $439 versus over there being $458. So I'm not saying ignore the minor stuff. I'm just saying don't get stuck inside the little details when the bigger details are the bigger issue. Number 6, and this is probably the most common out of them all, and I'm just going to say stop. Stop looking for cash flow with only 20% down. It does not exist. It doesn't, I don't think it exists anywhere in British Columbia, let alone my market here in the Lower Mainland. 3-4 times a week, I get a call from somebody that says, listen, I saved up my 20% down. Now I'm ready to become an investor. I need to add to my income. I've got $100,000. I want to buy a 1-bedroom apartment for $500,000, and I really need that extra $600 to $1,000 a month. Once they crunch the numbers, they realize really quickly that they're not only not making $600 to $1,000 a month, but they're already cash flowing negative at that 20% down. In this market, for as long as I can remember, almost all of the time, except for a couple of times, and I'll make note of those times, properties in the Lower Mainland will usually not start breaking even on rent until at least 35% down. And these days, most of the properties I'm seeing are 38 to 40% down before they even start breaking even. So if you're looking for cash flow of $500, $600, $700 a month, you got to think again. You got to be putting down like 50%. You have to generate your own cash flow by putting down about half of the purchase price of the property. So stop at 20% down. You're still cash flowing negative. That will continue for a long, long time. And I've never seen it really change except for one time. And that was actually when I bought a property and I saw an opportunity there. And that brings us to point number 7. Stop thinking that borrowing the 20% down from something like a line of credit is indeed buying a property with 20% down. If you have to borrow the 20% down payment out of your line of credit, which is I'm guilty of, I did it myself, but if you have to borrow that, that is not now a 20% down payment. That property is now financed 100%. So you have to do the calculations based off of 100% financing, which is again going to absolutely destroy your cash flow. Now, with every rule, there is the exception. And I'm going to say, not that I'm special, I took advantage of the exception. At one point, prices were low enough, and this has to do with lockdown and emergency rate cuts and all that stuff. At one point, prices were low enough where I could buy a condo, and I did, and I financed the down payment through a line of credit on my property, essentially financing the property at 100% and tying my principal residence to it, and that property broke even at that time. But in order to do that, I needed to buy the property at like $475,000. It's worth way more than that now. I got an interest rate at under 2%. And then I rented it out for like $250 more than I actually had thought I was going to rent it out for when I did the analysis of buying the place in the first place. So I don't want you to think that borrowing the down payment is buying a place with 20% down. It's now 100% financing. So if 20% down means you're cash flowing negative $800 a month, then borrowing the down payment from your line of credit is likely now putting you in a cash flow situation of like negative, I don't know, 12 or 1300 bucks. And then you have to look at that and compare it to what's getting paid down on principal every single month. And now ask, are you just subsidizing a renter, or are you actually even paying down principal on your investment property? Because I don't actually think there's anything wrong with cash flowing negative. In fact, most of our investors do it. However, you better not be chipping into that interest, because now again, you're just subsidizing a renter instead of actually putting some money into your pocket. Let me know if you think I'm wrong on any of these details. Let me know if you've made any of these mistakes down below in the comments. Thank you for subscribing, clicking the like button. We'll see you in a couple of days.